G'day everybody, I'm Patrick. Welcome to the workshop. I've got 48 legs here, solid hardwood, ironbark, for some benches I'm making, and they need to be tapered. That taper is approximately 10 millimeters from one end to the other. These are 600 millimeters long, which means it's about 1 degree. I could set up a tapering jig on the table saw. I could draw a line, and I could rough cut to that line on the bandsaw, and then I could hand plane it down. Or I could make a really simple jig and run these through the thicknesser, and in a couple of passes, they will all be identical. And that's what I'm going to show you how to make. This jig is so simple that I'm not going to try and make it multi-purpose. I'm going to make it quick and fast. That's the same thing. I'm going to make it quick and dirty so that I can get to work, and then I'll make another one if I need another one down the track for a different job. Making a taper on a thicknesser is incredibly simple. All you need to do is lift one end up and make sure it stays in that position as it goes through the thicknesser. Now I need to take 10 mil. This thicknesser will easily take 3 mil of this material off at a time, so it'll be 3 passes. I'm gonna make a jig that'll hold 4 of these legs side by side, so I can smash out this bunch pretty quickly rather than doing it leg by leg. But if you just had 4 legs to do, you could make a jig that just held 1 of them. All this jig is a solid base, which in this case is just 18 mil MDF. This is actually what is going to slide through the thicknesser. My stock is going to sit on top of this base, so the base needs to be fairly sturdy. And then I need to prop up one end of my timber with something the thickness of that taper. So in this instance, I have a 10 mil taper from end to end. I need 60 mil at one end and 50 mil at the other. So the end that I want to be 50 mil, I put 10 mil underneath, and boom, that's cutting my 1 degree angle. I need to make sure that this doesn't slide around, so I'm gonna put some fences down, and that's just gonna be some 12 mil thick plywood on either side. I'm gonna need a foot at one end to stop them sliding out that direction, and a head at the other end to stop them sliding out that direction, and then my packer, and that's it. If the stock that you're trying to taper has some flex, then rather than just using one little packer, your best bet is to place a second piece of MDF and actually pack that whole piece of MDF. The reason you need to do that is because you need something to support your piece of timber to stop it flexing in the middle. Otherwise, you're gonna have a curved taper. This stuff is not gonna flex, so I don't need to worry about that. I can just prop up the head. All right, let's get making. This is going to be pinned together. It'll be more than enough strength for what it's going to be used for. I'll start by putting on a side rail. I'm going to place 4 of my legs into the jig so that I know that I am leaving enough space to get them in and out, and then I can put my other fence on. I'm not going to make this too tight. It doesn't matter if they move a fraction of a mil from side to side. The end-to-end movement is more important. It needs a little foot piece, even though most of the force on these pieces will be going the other direction, I believe. Now, because the head is going to be raised up slightly, we need to make sure our fence at the head end is actually higher, because my shim is 10 mil, my fences are only 12 mil, so there's not a ton of extra fence there. So I made this out of some 30 mil Oregon. I'm going to pin that head down with some slightly longer tacks because piece is thicker, and then I might put 1 or 2 screws in it. And you need to make sure that you can still lift these in and out so you don't have too much tension, too much pressure on any of those fences, because we need to be able to change these over quickly. So this is my shim stock. It's a little chunk of American oak. It's about 20 mil by 10 mil. That 10 mil is the thickness that I need to create that taper. However, this thing is rectangular. I want to add a slight taper to this piece so that there's no chance that my stock is going to seesaw over that edge. I'm going to exaggerate the taper here so you can see. I'm essentially going to cut that. So I'm going to leave it at 10 mil on one edge, and I'm going to cut it down a few mil on the other. And the way I'm going to do that is just make a very simple cradle directly onto my NBF workbench. This is why I don't have a fancy workbench. Arguably, if you had a really nice fancy workbench that had a whole bunch of dog holes and stuff, you wouldn't need to do this. But with some scraps of whatever I've got and a pin gun, I can work hold any weird piece onto this bench and then just pull it up afterwards. To make sure I've left one side of this as 10 mil, I'm just gonna draw some black pencil, you could use texture, all over the top, so that when I'm planing this, I know that I'm leaving a line here that will remain black or unplaned. Now all I need to do is just plane it down a bit. Okay, so that's done. It's subtle, but you can see that that line of pencil only remains on one side now. There's a slight taper to that. It's not as exaggerated as my line, but it doesn't need to be. And this means that there's no chance that my work is gonna seesaw over that front edge of my packer. So the packer just needs to go right in front of my largest stop. If you've got any metal on a jig like this, like pins and screws, you want to make sure that it's well and truly below the level that the thicknesser blades will come in contact with. Because all of my stock is significantly higher than this whole jig, it doesn't really matter too much if it's got pins all over it, even though it's aesthetically displeasing. The point is make the jig quick, do the work. Okay, now we can put some of our sticks in here, make sure they're sitting solidly and put it through the thicknesser. In terms of putting this through the thicknesser, it's worth knowing exactly how thick this thing is now and how thick it needs to be when you're finished. So right now with the jig, this stock is measuring at about 91 mil, so that gives me a place to start. I'm happy to probably start at 87, 88 mil. That'll take a few mil off the top here. I have drawn some reference marks of where this taper should end. So I've drawn what 60 mil thick would be down this end and what 50 mil thick would be down this end. And that means I can keep looking at this as I go through. There's a couple ways to do this. You could either do all of the sticks through at one height and then all of the sticks through at the next height and all of the sticks through at the third height. And that would be one way of doing it. If it's really easy to get these sticks in and out of the sled, then that could work. If the handling of that is too inconvenient and you've got a digital rise and fall on your thicknesser, you could potentially figure out what the 3 heights are that you want to stick to and do all of the passes on 4 sticks, reset it, all of the passes on another 4 sticks, etc. The risk of doing that potentially is that if you mess up those measurements, you could send a pile through that was just way too high for the level that you'd set and you'd end up trying to take 6 or 9 mil off at one time. I think because this jig is easy to use, I'm gonna do everything through at one pass, everything through at another, and everything through for a third. This is the lovely 3-phase thicknesser. It has about a 635 millimeter bed on it, and it uses helical heads. It has a digital rise and fall, which is very, very simple. So I'm gonna set that to, let's say 88 for our first pass. It goes there automatically, and then I can turn it on and send it through. You should wax your bed for doing this, but the other thing we can do is wax the hell out of our sled, because the underside is just MDF. It doesn't matter how much wax we put on that, it's not going to affect the finish on any of these pieces. So I'm going to put a heap of candle wax or soft wax on that MDF bed, and that'll keep that whole sled running through really smoothly. Make sure you have a good place to collect these from and stack them up again afterwards. I've got these great little rolling trolleys, half height rolling trolleys that are amazing for moving stock around the workshop. So I've got one at the in-feed, one at the out-feed. You'll have to excuse the off-cut pile from this job. I've also marked all of the sticks with a reference X, which shows me which side goes up when they go into the jig, because they'll be going through multiple times. I need to make sure they're at the same orientation each time, otherwise I'm not going to end up with a taper. It'll be a weird multi-angled object. So I've got some X's on here. I'm going to put these through low side first. I'm going to have to manually push them through as far as possible, which is why I have a nice large tail on this end. And then once the thicknesser engages with this ramp, it'll start cutting that material. Okay, so that's 45 bench legs that are tapered exactly from 60 at the wide end down to 50 at the bottom. They're all identical. I took 4 passes on the thicknesser. I was doing about 3mm cuts per pass, and the machine handled it brilliantly. Those first couple passes are awkward because the piece of work isn't actually contacting the rollers until right at the very end, because you're just taking off the high part and then you take off a bit more and a bit more. So you need to make sure your sled is long enough to push it through comfortably without shoving your hands inside. A jig like this is so easy to make. It's really useful. You can use it for any size of stock as long as it fits inside your thicknesser. You can do really long pieces if you make a really long sled, and I don't think it needs to be fancy. You can just make it for whatever job you need. I think it's really nice to know that you can get exact tapers that way. I find cutting tapers on a table saw really sketchy often, so this is safer, it's more comfortable for me, and I think it gives you a better result. There'll be some links down below to some of the products I've used, especially the thicknesser. I've had this thicknesser now for about a year and it's been fantastic. It's a real powerhouse, and I love having the digital rise and fall. It just makes things so much easier. Don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, it really helps us out. I'll have another video for you next week. See you soon.